Welcome back to the Form is Temporary podcast, and we are absolutely delighted to have for our Game Week 29 review and look ahead to the international break a very good member of the FPL community, a great friend as well. His content is very unique, and he's going to have a little debrief on what happened in Blank Game Week 29. So FPL Nightmare, Andrew, take it away.
And so the Form is Temporary podcast is here, and this week they've invited myself, the FPL Nightmare, onto the show. And if it had been any of the last few game weeks, there may have been a problem because those heartbreaking red arrows were plaguing my campaign. My head had gone and my confidence was through the floor. However, game week 29 was not an ordinary game week. No, it was the greatest game week in the history of football. It was the game week where, in defiance of the algorithm acolytes demanding I sign Haaland, I instead brought in and captained Bruno Fernandes. It was the game week where I ignored the calls for Gvardiol and instead I swooped for the Serbian superstar Milenkovic. Furthermore, it was the game week where my beloved Newcastle, they burned the history books. They did exactly what I knew they could do. They played the best team in the land off the park, and they brought home that magnificent trophy. So, needless to say, my emotions have been lifted, my rank has been slashed, and my confidence is fully restored. But now we need to cement those emotions ahead of the big run-in. And to do that, we must integrate the lessons of the last week into our psyche. And to do that, we need to evaluate them in more detail. So today, we'll be analysing the greatest cup win of all time. We'll be discussing whether the New England manager, Thomas Tuchel, can harness the unrivaled power of Big Dan Burn. And we'll be having an early look towards game week 30. Before all that, though, you need to make sure to hit that subscribe button. And now it's over to Roberto for the game week 29 review.
There was FPL Nightmare Andrew. Thank you so much for that, Andrew. That was fantastic. Sensational way to look back on the last game week. And yeah, of course, my trusty co-host is with me as always. Chris, how are you? And thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was absolutely sensational. Warren Buffett-esque, I think, there. So, yeah, fantastic. And yeah, I'm good. Thank you, Roberto.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to get you on, Andrew. Really excited for this game week review. It is really exciting to see the kind of run-in, as you mentioned, coming up. And we have to stay patient. We have to sit on our hands a little bit these next couple of weeks with no football at the weekend in the Premier League, international break, followed by the FA Cup the weekend after. It's quite a rare thing. We don't see that too often. No Premier League games for 2 weekends running. But then we've got a midweek deadline, importantly, to kind of factor in for game week 30 after those FA Cup quarterfinals. So it will be more of a pod, as most FPL content will be this week, looking back rather than looking forward. But we've got a pod in the next week to look ahead to the FA Cup games with the lovely FPL Black Wolf. That'll be good fun. And then we will cover 2 game weeks. As you said, Andrew, it's about that run-in, that exciting run-in. We'll cover game week 30 and 31 with a legend of the community himself, actually. We're really excited to get him on. And it's going to be really good fun with Clayton, who, to be fair, from Planet FPL knows about planning ahead. And, he gets that probably from James, who's a great influence. But no, Andrew, firstly, you talked about it in your summary. Some big balls calls were made in your team. Talking of that, obviously, game week 29, we're going to get your team up just here now. So you ended up on a final points in game week 29 of 71 points. Very, very good week. And it was really interesting, wasn't it, to kind of see the difference, Andrew, between there was a few teams, not too many, but a few teams that activated their free hit if they had triple Liverpool, triple Newcastle, etc. And so it was generally advised to try and hold it if you can, because of course we know that the bigger blank game week will be game week 34. We're yet to find out who those teams will be, depending on FA Cup's results. But 71 points in a blank game week, I mean, I bet you must have been absolutely delighted with that. So for the purposes of the audio, could you just run through sort of the points and the highs and lows, really?
Yeah, well, in goal, I've got Jordan Pickford. Is my microphone all right?
Yeah, all good.
Yeah. Well, in goal, I've got Jordan Pickford, who got 3 points, but obviously his next 5 games is a bit of a disaster. In defence, I've got Dara O'Shea. Like, of all the times for Dara O'Shea to produce an assist from nowhere, get 3 points, that's 3 points. That feels more like 10 to me. So I've got Dara O'Shea in defence. Especially with it being like in the last minute. I mean, it was a very fun game week. I've got Kirkes, who is a consistent assist merchant at the minute, 4 points for the last 3 game weeks running. Although you would like him to get a few clean sheets in there, but Bournemouth seem to have gone off the boil just a touch.
Yeah.
I've got Gabriel, who got 5 points, and he's a boring pick, Gabriel. I regret bringing him in, even though he's got points, because he's just not that exciting to me. And to be honest, if you're going against people that have got like Raya in goal as well, then it doesn't benefit you for Gabriel to get the assists and get the clean sheets and stuff anyway, because Raya's going to get them too. So I'd rather just go against him completely for the run-in. And then I've got big Milenkovic. Always trust the Serbs, Roberto. I know you watch Jelena. And you should listen to her. And you did. You did at last. And for once, we collaborated on a decision. We got the same decision, and it worked out for us, Roberto. It's not been a good run with hashtag Roberto's tepid takes. But,
yeah, it's funny. To give a bit of context on that for people not sure about that. So that if you follow me on Twitter, thank you if you do. Talking of which, actually, I have to mention, I really appreciate the support. I've got a lot recently and just got 2.6k followers this morning, so I really appreciate that. But yeah, it's already a running joke, isn't it, Andrew? Whenever we interact on Twitter, it feels like I'll make a big call and it will usually go south. But ahead of game week 29, I was pretty set on getting a Forest defender, and just like you, I thought, yeah, trust the Serbs, because Milenkovic, he is. A lot of people were saying, oh, the XG wasn't there, and you had better actually bonus points potential for the likes of Murillo and possibly Aina, but actually the goal threat was still there, even if the underlying numbers weren't. And yeah, Milenkovic. I mean, I was a bit frustrated with that result, even though obviously it's a lovely points haul, wasn't it, Chris? 11 points for the Serb. I was a bit annoyed because he ended up only getting 1 bonus point in that game. Now, I can understand at this point, bonus point system is stacked against defenders, because every goal they concede, it's -4 in the BPS. But Kajuste, or whatever his name was, from Ipswich, scored a goal as a midfielder, got 2 bonus, and a defender who gets a goal and assist just getting 1. Can you understand my frustration? Maybe even Andrew's as well, about just the 1 bonus point for Nicola?
Yeah, 100%. I think especially with the Ipswich midfielder taking kind of the bonus point off him. I think at one stage it looked like when he had the clean sheet, he was on for maybe an 18, 19 point haul, which would have been absolutely monstrous, really. But yeah, still a good kind of points total, to be fair. But yeah, a bit annoying with the bonus point system, how it worked this year, because yeah, like you say, it's very weighted towards certain positions, which it's not. Doesn't seem that fair, but yeah, that's how it is, I guess.
Yeah, that's the way it's been. It's been kind of set out this season. Your midfield, though, Andrew, I have to say, you talked about the Fernandes transfer in. I mean, that was a genius move, really, to take out Trent. To take out Trent, was a nice move, because obviously we knew that Trent had picked up that injury in the game against PSG. But then obviously a lot of people did sort of think about maybe a midfield transfer. I mean, I wasn't in that luxury, because I just thought, well, Dango, he might not start, but I'll just have to try to do that. But there was a lot of murmurings about Bruno Fernandes. And before we reflect on that amazing captaincy for you, Andrew, I was very pleased to have the pleasure of going on Fantasy 606 ahead of Game Week 29. And this is what happened. Spice things up. I think the listeners are on a title charge. They've got to go for it. They've got to take a risk. And so I'm going to go captaincy on Bruno Fernandes.
Okay. And what about team name, Roberto?
Well, it's simple. The team name this week has to be Love It If We Beat Them. And we would love it as listeners to beat Statman beat Ali. Sorry, Chris. At this point, I think you might have to count yourself out of the title chase at this point. But no, it'd be great if we can do a Kevin Keegan, but do it the right way this time and get the job done to take home that win.
Yeah. My worry for you, Roberto, is you've come in. This isn't an easy week. Who was the one? It was Herschel Gibbs, Bruce, who the World Cup dropped the catch.
Oh, dropped Steve Waugh, and Steve Waugh said he dropped the World Cup there, mate.
Could Roberto be Herschel Gibbs?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I've just got that feeling.
I'll tell you what's quite interesting, Chris. Roberto's finished really strongly there on listeners. We're all as one. I would love it if we beat them. But earlier, division in the ranks, having a pop at Reese Mavericks, not setting the team up for double game. They could be falling apart.
And that's what
now
I'm thinking.
Now that I'm in charge, Ali, we can steer this boat towards victory. About that, I did in fact bring in Bruno Fernandes for the listeners team and captained him. And I have to say, when you do things like that about a man like Roberto Hollis, I've kept really quiet. But I'll tell you something. Chris went down in my estimation. We're still fighting for this title. Ali and Dave wasted their triple captain. I will love it if we beat them. Love it. So, yeah, up to by a rank gain of 132k. We're up to first in the Fantasy 606 League. Love it if we beat them, the team name, with 1,894 points. But I tell you, Andrew, it is a title race we've got on our hands because Ali in second, just 4 points behind. Then Statman in third, just another 2 points behind that. And then Chris.
I saw on the, I think it was on Twitter, wasn't it? I saw that.
Yeah.
Excited. I wondered if I could sneak into the league and go top in my first game week.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic pod. I love Fantasy 606 so much, and it was great to make my third appearance. So a pleasure to do that. And yeah, I really had quite an exciting week. I have to say, I was back from uni. Me and Chris, we had a week off, so I was very delighted to have the opportunity to go on there and go on a few other pods, the likes of FPL Have a Beer, who I know you're a massive fan of as well, Andrew, and also on FPL Addicts.
I would say friend.
Friend, yeah, exactly. He's such a lovely guy, and he's so easy to talk to. But this all links around the Bruno Fernandes big balls call to captain him. So, firstly, from your perspective, Chris, I know there was a lot of talk this game week about captaining Haaland, and in a lot of content creators' sort of captaincy options, their favourite for the captaincy was Haaland, followed by Chris Wood with that Ipswich game, and then Bruno Fernandes in third. But in the end, of course, the sort of results, the top scoring captaincy option, Bruno Fernandes, then Haaland, and then Chris Wood. So Fernandes away to Leicester was obviously a great fixture, wasn't it, Chris? But for those that didn't make the move, do you understand why? Because of Man United's overall kind of lack of consistency?
Yeah, I can see why. I mean, when you've got kind of Chris Wood with that fixture, most people own him. I think that kind of makes sense. But yeah, obviously the bravery was rewarded from your part, Andrew. So yeah, no, you've got to respect it. And I think despite Man United obviously being in quite a difficult position, so at the moment, he's obviously been the shining light and kind of carrying them through. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what managers like you, Andrew, do with him in the next few weeks. Around wildcards and things like that, because if he continues this form, maybe he is one to think about on a wild card. Who knows? Yeah,
it's interesting because the fixtures, Andrew, for Manchester United after this game against Leicester, they just won. They do turn for the worst a little bit, and Forest in game week 30. So, are you looking at keeping Bruno long term, or are you just going to kind of switch him out soon?
Well, to be honest, I think if we always trust the serves, I'm going to have to bench him this week, aren't I? So that could be the problem. But what I actually think is I'll probably just keep him this week. I don't think there's much needed to do this week. And also I have Cole Palmer in my team. So I think he's more of a priority than a man who has got 46 points in 4 game weeks.
Yeah, exactly. Great form for Bruno Fernandes. So that was a really good transfer in for Dango, which I wish I could have done that, to be honest, because I was tempted by another, -4, but I just wanted to not take a hit in game week 29. So I ended up not doing that transfer, and yes, hoped that Dango started. He of course didn't and got another 1-pointer, but you know what, it could be a lot worse. You could have brought in someone like a Savinho for Dango who got less points than him, But yeah, your other transfer there was Evan Nilsson, which is interesting. And you were a fellow Gakpo owner like me, Andrew, and it was frustrating, obviously, wasn't it, against Southampton when he didn't play. So Evan Nilsson came in for him. I bet you were watching that Bournemouth game, hoping for something in that game, and he actually had chances, didn't he, Evan Nilsson?
Yeah, he had that one that he kind of scooped up, and then he should have scored, and it kind of spooned up towards the top corner. So it was a bit frustrating, but you have to look at it as a 2 game week signing, really, because if you're going to wildcard in game week 31 like I'm planning to, and next week Evan Nilsson's at home to Ipswich, and we know what happened with Ipswich this week, so I'm still confident it'll pay off. Obviously, I could have gone for Marmoush and really stole the show, but I just wasn't confident in that Marmoush starting, and he's only until the weekend he'd only returned in 1 game. So
exactly. Yeah.
I just fancied Evan Nilsson. I wanted him before he got injured, and then he got injured, and at the end of the day, he's 5.6 million. You can't expect miracles, but I do expect more against Ipswich Town, and if there isn't, there's going to be trouble.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it, Chris, that they've had that pattern earlier on in the season, Brentford, of being really, really good at home and terrible away, and now it feels like that's sort of switched around where they can't seem to score goals at home, but they played really well to win that game at Bournemouth. Obviously, they didn't, have loads of chances necessarily, and Bournemouth had some good opportunities that they didn't quite take, but I guess ultimately they're quite a streetwise team, Brentford, aren't they? And they scored kind of good sort of set piece opportunity goals, and obviously the kind of long throw and the goal from Norgard. So as someone who might own Brian and Mbumo, and if any other FPL managers have little Brentford assets, their fixtures, a bit like we were saying with Man United, their fixtures are really tough, and they travel to Newcastle in game week 30. So if you had a Brian and Mbumo or a Johan Wissa, would you just keep the faith there, Chris?
Yeah, it's tricky because it on paper is a very tough fixture. I think under the lights at St James's, but yeah, like you say, with Brentford's away form, then maybe there is a case to be made for those players. Yeah, I think this is real. I mean, he's kind of gone under the radar a little bit. I feel like his points per game ratio this season has been pretty excellent, really. So yeah, I think probably people who are planning to hold their wild card off till game week 31 and probably in a good position to maybe keep an Mbumo, for example. Obviously, he's on penalties as well, so you never know what could happen there.
Yeah, but it just shows, doesn't it, Andrew, that a -4 sometimes is worth it. I know a lot of people this season, especially with the 5 rolled transfers, are kind of quite scared to take hits because it feels like you're always at an immediate disadvantage when not many people are taking hits. But in weeks like this, where the captaincy is not clear and you can make a gain, it just shows the kind of potential of it, doesn't it?
Well, what I would say is that I was listening to all above average FPL's Adam on the FPL Have a Beer show last week, and he described it as an investment 4 points. And that's what I felt it was this weekend. It wasn't a hit. I wasn't taking a hit to get Bruno Fernandes. I was investing 4 points into who I felt was the best captaincy option that week. And obviously it's paid off in spades. I've got 47 points from them 3 new signings when, I would have had 1 point if I hadn't made the transfers. So that was a very good investment, 4 points. And I think that's a good mindset to have for these hits. If you think of it as an investment, it's maybe worth it a bit more.
Yeah, but, absolutely.
To go back on what Chris said about Brentford at St James's Park, what I would imagine is that it is going to be a goal fest. I feel that match is going to be a party. I don't anticipate any sort of clean sheets. I anticipate 3-2 or 4-3, one way or the other. So I would honestly consider investing in Wissa for a 1 week punt because, I mean, what has he got? 6 big chances over the last 7 game weeks or something stupid.
Yeah.
He's got the most apart from Haaland in the division, I think. And he scored against us at the start of our glorious cup run. And obviously that ended in glory, but he did get that consolation goal at the end of a 4-1 defeat. Yeah. So I would not be worrying about your Brentford assets this week at all.
Yeah, that's really good advice, I think. But in the rest of your midfield, Cliver, yeah, as we said with Bournemouth, a bit disappointing. Bowen with a 5, and Cole Palmer, Chris. This was the week that we needed Cole Palmer to at least turn up, and he picked up an injury, looks like a hamstring. So in a game week where we were trying to sort of plug holes, it was Cole Palmer that really did ruin a lot of our blank game week teams. So yeah, are you concerned about him? Because obviously with the Spurs game on the horizon, it could well be that by then Nicholas Jackson is back in the team. But with Palmer's lack of form and potentially now lack of absence, lack of availability, I suppose, is the better way of putting it. Are you confident that by the international break in the FA Cup, he should be back for Tottenham, or are you a bit more unsure?
To be honest, I didn't know it was a hamstring injury. That's obviously always a bit more vulnerable to a longer kind of absence, I reckon. But yeah, I think because it's such a big game, obviously Spurs, that's the big one for Chelsea. Like I feel like even if he's maybe half it or 75% kind of there, I think he will start. So yeah, I think unless he gets ruled out by Maresca kind of in the press conferences before the game, I think if you do own him currently, maybe he is worth punting on, because I think that game could be very, very kind of lucrative for him, especially if Jackson's back as well.
Yeah,
I think he's really missed him, kind of their partnership. So
yeah, I think it was a muscular injury, so it could well be muscle, hamstring, that sort of region. But it is interesting, I think, because we have so much that can change in these next couple of weeks. So he's definitely not a sell 100%, is he, Andrew? Like if he is confirmed to play in game week 30, it might end up putting a lot of people off moving for an Erling Haaland if you've not already got him. And at home to Tottenham could be really good for Palmer, couldn't it?
What I would say is that you've got to look at it in the context of the squad. Now, if you look at like my team, for example, and I would imagine quite a few people will have similar, I've got Isak and Salah on the bench and I've got 6 attackers. Now, if Isak and Salah come back into the team, I've got 8 attackers. So if Palmer misses out, what's the big deal? You've still got a full complement in attack. And you've got to look at who are the big targets for game week 30. And I think you're looking at Munoz from Palace, Mateta from Palace, and Marmoush or Haaland if you're feeling, big money. But none of them are midfielders. I don't think there are any big targets in midfield. So I don't think, especially if you're wildcarding for game week 31, I don't think you'd sell Palmer at all. Because what's the point?
Yeah.
Just have Wood on the bench, for example, or Joao Pedro or whoever you've got. And then if Palmer comes in. If Palmer doesn't play, then you've got a great sub. But I feel like you've got to attack. And who are the midfielders to bring in for Palmer this week?
It's an interesting point.
I don't go with the FPL, the official website that suggests Bukayo Saka is the best signing in midfield, because I feel like that's foolish. And going back to hamstring injuries, how long is it going to be until Saka's fully fit and starting? And I don't think he's an option for the rest of the season, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah.
But, no, I would just keep Palmer. What's the point? Where are you going to gain the most points this week? It's either going to be Munoz, Mateta, or Marmoush, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I've looked ahead at game week 30, and I think it is ultimately down to who you think is the best captaincy. We'll kind of get onto your team soon, Chris. But I think if you think that Haaland's a better captain than Salah, then that makes a good argument for if Palmer is a sort of 50-50, you can just let him go and hope that the Tottenham game doesn't kind of hurt you too badly, because Haaland at home to Leicester could be really, really nice, of course. He obviously wasn't incredibly, involved in that Brighton game, but he still is on penalties, and he's, a bit more nailed potentially than like a Marmoush, who has kind of been rested certain games. So I guess if that factors into selling Palmer, because a lot of people will have to do that to get to Haaland, and you could look at maybe Palace players, I suppose, Chris, because they've obviously got Southampton. So if you're looking for a midfielder, maybe an Ismail Assar, who's been in really good form recently, and obviously will have the double in 32. Do you think that's a good potential Palmer replacement, someone like an Eze or a Sarr?
I think if you're looking for a replacement, those are probably the standouts. Yeah, I think obviously if you maybe don't own a Bournemouth midfield, I'm sure not many people do now, but obviously Ipswich at home is a great fixture as well. But yeah, I agree with Andrew. I think really, unless you're forced into moving in to get Haaland, then Palmer, to be honest, isn't. I don't think you need to get rid of him, really.
Interesting. I mean, we'll take that as a pinch of salt as Chris being a Chelsea fan. He's always going to back his boy. But yeah, no, I understand there's good logic there. And the rest of your team, obviously, Evan Nilsson, we've discussed. Chris Wood. Now, that's a third blank in a row, Andrew, for Chris Wood. I own him, and I've owned him pretty much since game week 6. So I'm so loyal to him at this point. And, we'll shout out Yellow. And again, the Chris Wood fan club is still going strong, in my opinion. And you've got to factor in those 3 blanks, he's had games against Arsenal and against Manchester City. But are you concerned about the lack of involvement he had in that Ipswich game ahead of the match against Man United?
I'm not concerned at all because he's the one I'm going to be selling for Marmoush or Mateta. But I do think with Chris Wood, we've been having this conversation all season. Oh, he's not involved enough in games. Oh, he's not getting the chances. Yeah. Oh, his run's going to dry up. And, maybe it has. He has had some tough fixtures. He didn't do much against Ipswich. But again, is it really a priority? If you're wildcarding in game week 31, is selling Chris Wood this week a priority? Now, you see that for me, if you're going for a Marmoush or a Mateta, then I would say he is perhaps the one to get rid of. Especially if you've already got a Haaland or an Isak, it's hard because it depends on your team. I wouldn't be worried about keeping Chris Wood because he's going to do what Chris Wood does.
Yeah, exactly. And he doesn't need chances to get returns. And he's on penalties, of course. That Forest game, though, Chris, was really interesting because on the pod last week, we talked about, I think on the free hit drafts we had a few sort of differing opinions from FPL MV, Angle and Tom from who got the assist. They were saying, maybe go for a Hudson-Odoi or go for an Anthony Elanga. Now, of course, if you went for the kind of double up of Nico Williams and Callum Hudson-Odoi versus going for potentially a Milenkovic and an Elanga, I mean, obviously that was a massive swing in game week 29. So for those that did go on the wrong side of that coin, if you went for an Ola Aina or a Nico Williams and potentially a Hudson-Odoi, can you see kind of good points for them in that Man United game? Because it must have been quite harsh in game week 29, right?
Yeah, that would be very unfortunate. I mean, yeah, especially kind of seeing that clean sheet get eroded in the second half as well, because that would have softened the blow a little bit. But I think with regards to the United fixture, I think Wood is still a great pick for that game. I know United kept a clean sheet against Leicester, but I think any team at the moment can do that, really. They're just so, they offer no real threat going forward. So, I think Wood is fine, to be honest. Maybe there's a case, the Forest defenders, I don't know, but at home against at the City ground, they've just been so reliable. So, I don't think it's a priority to get rid of either, to be honest.
Exactly. So, all in all, really good game week for you, Andrew. It has to be said, despite you only having 9 players with Palmer's absence. Moving into game week 30, be interesting to see. There's a lot that can change still, but your rank, I have to say, is fantastic. 16k at this point in the season is really, really impressive. Talking of impressive ranks, though, let's not get my team up. Instead, let's get up Chris's team because he is having an absolute stormer of a season, it has to be said, Andrew. I don't quite know how he's doing it, but let's leave Chris to explain. Game week 29, 59 points. You're now up to 9k overall. You took a -4 as well, just like Andrew. So, talk us through it. Obviously, Raya with a nice clean sheet for you to start with.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, the Chelsea game, not a great result for me, but I think just Arsenal, just so reliable defensively, and it's just kind of a safe pick, really, Raya between the sticks. Well, it'd be interesting to see what people do regarding kind of maybe not moving towards a double Arsenal defence on wildcard. It feels like a bit of a safety blanket for me, to be honest. So I don't know whether I will or not, but so that was nice, owning Raya. I also own Milenkovic, so like you two, so that was also very nice. And then the Robinson, I know that caused a bit of controversy for you, Roberto, with the Fulham defender you own. So, obviously I was on the right side of that coin in that respect. Nice for Fulham to finally get a clean sheet because feel
Yeah,
like the underlying
saw a
numbers have
stat.
been there.
Yeah, I saw a stat, Chris, right? This is crazy. But the last time they kept a clean sheet and won at home, Fulham, was in game week 29 last season at home to Tottenham. So they've
Oh,
done it
wow.
against Tottenham at home, kept a clean sheet just once in the last, in each of the last 2 seasons. So pretty crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, that is astonishing, really. The same team as well they were playing. But yeah, I think they seem to always concede the odd goal here and there. They're not conceding bagfuls of chances or goals, really. But yeah, it's just been a bit frustrating because obviously Robinson's kind of assists have dried up a little bit as well recently. So yeah, but no, nice to get a clean sheet from him. And then elsewhere in my team, I mean, Semenyo was again frustrating. Obviously, had that point blank miss, which obviously Cliver owners won't be happy about either because he would have had the assist. But yeah, he's just been a constant source of frustration really throughout in the last 5-6 game weeks. I've kind of showed patience with him, but yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to get rid of him on wildcard whenever that will be. And then Mbumo with the assist, I think that wasn't it, for Visser's goal, the set piece. He wasn't really that involved, but yeah, I mean, again, nice to get a return. Obviously, Palmer, we've talked about. Bowen, yeah, the 5 point. I can't remember, who was that against? Everton, wasn't it?
Yeah, just got the assist for the Souček goal, I think.
Yeah, he's been chipping away with a couple of little points totals here and there, but yeah, he's not quite hit the heights that I think a lot of people hoped when they brought him in ahead of that Leicester game. But yeah, still good fixture next up as well, so maybe he could go big in that one.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that fixture for West Ham against Wolves in game week 30. You had Ait Nouri. Do you think Wolves defenders at this point, Andrew, are just not worth going anywhere near? Because even against Southampton, right, they conceded that one goal.
I would suggest most defenders aren't really worth going anywhere near this season. They're not really bringing in the points. But Wolves, I mean, if you're dependent on Wolves defenders to get your points, what position are you really going to be in? I'd just not bother. There's better options, for Ait Nouri, you could have Munoz next week. You've got Big Dan Burns back, the legend. But there's lots of options, There's no Kirkes in that squad. Kirkes is consistent and Bournemouth are better defensively. Man United have even tightened up a bit at the back, although they do have bad fixtures. You could get one of the cheaper Kusanov, is it, from Man City?
The guy that scored the own goal.
Well, yeah, well, people score own goals. These things happen. But, if you're looking for a defender that's going to likely concede, but you never know, you might get something. Why not go for Man City? Yeah. I just don't see the point in Wolves defenders. They've got nothing to play for because they're pretty much safe now. A couple more wins, and there's just better options. And when you think of all these doubles coming up, Wolves just don't factor into my thinking at all.
Exactly. I mean, fair play if you did go for the 1 week punt of a Strand Larsen against Southampton, because I think we mentioned him briefly on the pod last week, but I was never thinking about him just because Wolves without Cunha is so hard to predict. But they actually had a terrible XG against Southampton, but ultimately Strand Larsen picked up a couple of goals there. Now, fair play, Chris, on Marmoush. Did you have him prior to this game week?
No. So yeah, obviously, as Andrew spoke about earlier, it was a huge risk, really. And yeah, luckily it paid off this time around. But yeah, it could have easily gone the other way, to be honest.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. As soon as he got benched against Forest, Andrew, because I was actually in my early plans looking ahead to 29, I was going to get Marmoush in for the Brighton game. But when he got benched against Forest, that just put me off. And I think that's the sort of manager style I have. I'm quite a conservative manager. So when I see any sort of risk attached, I'm like, nope, not going there. And obviously, there was a lot of, as you said earlier, Andrew, a lot of doubt about whether he would start. But obviously, because of the deadline being 1:30, if you waited and made the transfer late, there was a leak, I think, about 5 minutes before deadline that Marmoush was starting. So, yeah, if you lived a risky life, then fair play if you've made that move. But do you think Marmoush will start the Leicester game? Because there is sort of debate about, it seems like a lot of the time Pep seems to be choosing between one or the other. Like in the game against Spurs, for instance, Foden was benched, and then obviously Marmoush was benched against Forest. So do you think Marmoush would start that Leicester game?
I can't see why he wouldn't. He's the only one of the he's the only one of the Man City attackers that are really having any sort of tangible impact on games. He's the only one that's getting people going. Like, Man City look weak. Like, they're still up there, just ahead of Newcastle, haven't played a game more, but then, they're not in the top 4 yet. And I think Marmoush he's the spark, isn't he? Like, I thought they'd lose to Brighton. I wouldn't have even been surprised if it was to 0, but Marmoush is the one that made things happen. So I'd honestly prefer him to Haaland if I was bringing in a Man City striker this week. Yeah, there's a bit of a risk, but you've got to take gambles in this game. It's not a game. You can't play safe. I tried playing safe for the last few game weeks and got red arrow after red arrow. So, you have to...
definitely is a conversation going to Leicester. I think obviously Haaland, he hasn't been terrible as an asset in the last sort of 5 or 6 game weeks, but he also hasn't been necessarily great for the price he is at, right? And we have to think about value in this game. And when Marmoush is, potentially great value, Chris, basically half of Haaland's rank, he's in form. As Andrew said, you would imagine he starts the Leicester game. So if you were in my position, Chris, and you had neither Haaland or Marmoush, and you wanted to attack that Leicester game, would you opt to go Marmoush and captain him, or just stick with the Norwegian?
Wow, big question. I think one thing to consider about Marmoush is potential, like we spoke about, with the risk attached to his kind of starting lineup place. I think obviously they play Bournemouth on Sunday night, is it 4:30?
Yeah,
quite late kickoff. So there's a very, very short turnaround between the Bournemouth fixture and then one against Leicester. So I'm slightly concerned that Marmoush may play the Bournemouth game, where I feel like his skill set might be more suited to that game, a bit more transitional. Whereas Leicester, you'd imagine, if they play like they did against Chelsea anyway, camped on the edge of their box, and you feel like maybe that might be more of a game for Foden. And it seems like it's either one or the other at the moment. However, I agree with what you're saying, Roberto, about Haaland. I think he's only got 3 or 4 double-digit returns this season overall.
Yeah, I think since game week 4, he's only had 2 double-digit hauls.
I mean, for the price, it's hard to justify, really. I think we spoke about this right at the start of the year, that he has to get those double-digit returns for you to kind of feel like he's like warranted a place in your team. And I think especially with Salah having such a good fixture against Everton, to be honest, I think I'd captain Salah over Haaland if I had a choice. So
I think on current form, you have to think Salah's a much better, form pick. Obviously, fixture wise, it is better for Haaland, but it's a lot of money to pay. And when we've already got Salah in our teams, or there's some people that sold him, which I think is crazy in 29, even though he had that blank game week. But I think Salah's obviously without any doubles coming up, but he's just incredible and inevitable at this point. Double-digit hauls for Salah this season, 17. Double-digit hauls for Haaland this season, I think it's 5. So it's a big difference there of when we think about captaincy, especially as I was saying earlier about if I want to sell Palmer, that would mean a hit to get Haaland in and captain him. Now, of course, you can justify the hit because it's going to be a good captain at home to Leicester, but I feel a lot better about Salah if I think he's got more potential and then I don't have to take a hit and I just keep Cole Palmer. So, we'll have to see. Things can change, obviously, going into the international break. But, all in all, really good game week for you, Chris. 59 points is very strong for a blank game week. So another nice green arrow for you. And, as I said, up to 9K with a good sort of team structure there. So, good stuff. My team in game week 29, a little bit worse, but ultimately not terrible. So I somehow fluked a green arrow in game week 28. Literally, Andrew, I was right on the safety score for a green. So I think I was going into the West Ham Newcastle game on a red. And I thought to myself, well, that means I need Bowen to do something because everyone's got Alexander Isak. But in the end, both Isak and Bowen blanks. And then I think I got 1 point off the bench because obviously Gakpo didn't play against Southampton. So 1 point from Dango from that Spurs game. And I thought, well, that's it. I've got a red arrow. And that 1 point actually was the difference to get me 62 bang on the safety score to get a green. So very small green arrow. But game week 29 was a bit more, I knew I was kind of in the trenches a little bit. My team So I had Henderson and a 4.0 non-playing keeper. So I knew that going this game week, I wasn't willing to sell Henderson because of the Southampton fixture in 30. And I thought no transfer is going to be worth it for a keeper. And the way it turned out, all the games on Saturday had no clean sheets. So I'm quite glad I didn't bring in a keeper, especially Edison, who didn't end up playing for Man City. But yeah, I knew going into this week I was going to be on 10 players, which I was fine with because Henderson's been sensational. But what I didn't know is about Cole Palmer, of course. So that meant I was down to 9 players in the end. So considering that, Andrew, I think 45, I beat the average. Obviously, it's a small red arrow, but I'm pretty happy with that, to be honest.
As long as you're happy, that's the main thing.
Yeah. What I'm not happy about, though, is which we'll get to early now, because you mentioned it earlier, Chris, with Robinson. Now, what I will say is this bonus point system is weighted towards attackers. So I can kind of get away with, I can kind of excuse the Kajuste and Milenkovic, potential changes there. What I can't excuse, or at least what I don't understand, and if official FPL could kindly explain it for us, that would be great, is how when the Fulham game ended, I'm looking at bonus points and I'm seeing the top 3. I think they were Castagna, Muniz, and I can't remember who the other one was. It might have even been Romero, because he ended up getting 2 because he got subbed off just before Muniz scored the goal. So I thought to myself, okay, you know what? Fair enough. Castagna, 1 bonus point. Lovely stuff. That's great. Differential. And right after the game ended, Andrew, official FPL tweeted out saying, Robinson collects another clean sheet. How happy are you with that return and that haul, FPL managers, right? And I understand why they did that, because Robinson's highly owned. So, if they tweeted out about Castagna, not many people would be able to relate to that. But I thought to myself, that's weird, because obviously Castagna wasn't in for any sort of shouts from their tweet, but also Robinson was nowhere near the bonus. So I thought, Castagna's got more points. That those that do have Castagna will be thinking, why have they tweeted about Robinson? And then it ends up, the bonus points we know changes with 1 hour after the final game of the game week. And so I check in to see after the Leicester United game what the bonus points are looking like. And out of nowhere, Robinson has gone up to 2 bonus and Castagna's completely dropped out of it. So to me, this made no sense, Andrew. Maybe it's just me being salty as a Castagna owner. But when Robinson was nowhere near the bonus originally, and I know that they have to obviously change, update the sort of information from the game based on assists, based on chances from Opta. They get the kind of stats from Opta to change the bonus points. But was really that sort of drastic a change necessary? And do you think Robinson owners have got a little bit fortunate with that?
I think Robinson owners have got a little bit fortunate all season. But no, I mean, I'm looking at, I've got it up on my screen now, and Castagna's not even in the top 5 Fulham players. So to go from having a bonus point to not even being top 5, it's a bit strange. But I can only think, maybe they've awarded him an extra foul that they hadn't credited originally, or they've taken away an interception or something like that, because it does seem quite a dramatic drop to go from, like 3rd to not even on the rankings on the top 5. So
it is interesting.
These bonus points this season have been nothing but trouble. Like, what are they doing? Like, double game weeks. They could change the first match of the game week before the end of the last match, like 12 days later, if they wanted. It's just it's madness.
Yeah, I do get it. And I think when Oscar came on, he talked about sort of changes to goals and assists, like you see with Solly March a few seasons ago. That I can understand, right?
Yeah.
But this bonus points is not changing what's happened in the game. It's actually just changing the bonus points, the baseline and changing what the kind of increments are for each player. And I just think if you've got a strategy of how you calculate the bonus points live during the game, to then sort of rip that up a little bit and then restructure it when it's so late into the game week, and most people were thinking, right, Castagna's going to finish on 7, and then all of a sudden he's on none. It's just like, yeah, Castagna, I don't actually mind, to be honest, dropping out the bonus points. It's the fact that Robinson was bumped up from nowhere, because I think he was about, if I remember rightly, I think Castagna was on, say, 26, 27, something like that. And I think on the baseline bonus, originally when the bonus points looked as they did, I think Robinson was way down in like 19, 18 or something. So it wasn't even like he was on the cusp of it. So
No,
But
that's
anyway,
quite a big bump, that really, isn't
yeah,
it?
it is. But we'll
You
get over
finished
that
on
because
31.
official FPL are going to do what they want, so we move on. Gabriel, lovely little return from my double Arsenal defence, and Timber, he's been a lovely differential for me, I have to say, and he got 3 bonus in that game against Chelsea, so loving him. Nice differential there. Milenkovic, we talked about, he was one of my transfers in, so on the pod I thought I was going to go Aina, but I ended up looking into it and looking at the goal threat that Milenkovic had, and I just didn't think the extra money for Aina was worth justifying. Milenkovic was there, and yeah, when he scored the goal, I was watching the Soccer Saturday, Chris, and I just started running around the living room like it was amazing. So Milenkovic, absolute legend in my team already. And yeah, 1 bonus point, that's fine. Midfield wise, it was pretty bleak, to be honest. No goals in my midfield, no goals in my forward line to kind of sum it up as well. But at least I got a return from Jared Bowen, even if it was just a measly assist. But then, yeah, Clive at blanking, Dango, another 1 pointer for him. And he was just a luxury transfer if you had the transfer, as you did, Andrew, with Bruno. But for me, I thought just field a player that's got a fixture and he'll at least get some points. But that didn't apply to Cole Palmer, which was very frustrating. So I ended up being on 9 players. But the striker that I brought in for Gakpo is the most annoying bit about it, because we talked about Muniz scoring. Yeah, so Muniz scored in Blank Gameweek 29 last season, the week that I free hitted, and I brought in Muniz on that free hit, and I didn't have room for him in the team. So he was first on my bench for 13 points. That game week, I scored 20 points. So my bench was made up of 25, I think. So I scored more on my bench than my actual team. And I'm thinking, right, ahead of this game week, you know what, Spurs, they're tired. They just played in the Europa League. I can target that fixture for a 1 week punt, because I thought I'm going to be selling this striker anyway in 30. Let's just get in a striker for 29. And it was between Pedro and Jimenez. In the end, Jimenez did get more than Pedro. But the fact that, Chris, Jimenez gets subbed off on 63 minutes, and literally about 6 or 7 minutes later, Muniz scores. And yeah, it's very frustrating that Muniz in back-to-back game week 29s has managed to troll me. So yeah, Jimenez, do you think that was a good shout, or do you think you should have maybe gone for a Strand Larsen or a Marmouche?
That's a tough break. Yeah, obviously, when he starts the game as well, you're hoping that maybe he can take advantage of, like you say, Spurs' fatigue from the Europa League. But yeah, it's just the way it goes sometimes. You can't really win sometimes with those sorts of decisions, especially with Fulham strikers. I think Muniz and Raul are they rotate quite well for Silva. So,
and this is the thing.
yeah.
I was confident he was going to start, and I was just hoping that he'd get enough points before he came off.
Yeah, he gets subbed as early quite often, doesn't he, for Muniz? But yeah, I can see why you went for him. It made sense, definitely.
Yeah, and Chris Wood, we've talked about blanking. He was my captain. The fact that Forest scored 4 goals, Andrew, and nothing from Wood, it's just, you couldn't write it, could you, really? I mean, it's just incredible. He also has a great record against promoted clubs, and I was just thinking, yeah, this will be great. Everyone's going to be taking hits and ripping up their team to get Haaland, and Haaland will blank and Wood will return, but it didn't happen. And yeah, I think we've talked about Wood. I think he's still great to keep, but also come wildcard territory in 31, 32, it will be a reluctant sell, I think, for me, because as much as he's saved my entire season, the Forest fixtures, they're okay, but they're not amazing. And also, double game week wise, even if they end up beating Brighton in the FA Cup, it's expected that their double against potentially a Brentford won't go actually in until around game week 35, 36. So that means, for the short term at least, Forest assets are maybe a little bit more expendable, but maybe keep them for the United game, because we know what United are like away from home against good teams. But yeah, on the bench, Bender, Salah, Isak, and Hall. Hall, I've just not had a chance to sell him, and I probably won't in game week 30 either. So that's our game week 29 teams. Looking back on the week, let us know in the sort of Twitter on the accounts how you got on with your points in game week 29. But I've got to, of course, give a shout out to Newcastle United, Andrew. What a win that was against Liverpool. I watched that game, obviously, as a Watford fan, no sort of affinity to either side. And it wasn't just because I knew you were a Newcastle fan that I wanted them to win. Genuinely, I mean, I like to back the underdog usually, but I'm watching this game and I'm literally feeling the love and the passion radiate off the screen from Newcastle's fans. And I just wanted Newcastle to get it done, and I was so pleased they did. So, yeah, what were your initial emotions after the final whistle?
Well, my initial reaction after the final whistle, I'm pretty sure you can imagine it was quite an emotional one. Although, to be honest with you, half time, I was absolutely gone because, like a minute before half time, the local lad, Big Dan Burn, that massive header right into the bottom corner. And it's like, oh my God, how has he done this? Like, I'm screaming at the telly. The cats have run up 2 flights of stairs and they're hiding under the bed. Like, my eyes were just streaming, and I'm like, what's going on? It's not even half time yet. And then obviously Diogo Jota he had that chance right at the death of the half, and he knocked it like 15 yards wide. And it got to half time. And honestly, I think I needed half time more than the players. I was gone, like, and then when you come back after half time, and then the cats had crept back downstairs, and then Isak had the goal ruled out. So I'd screamed at the telly again, and then they'd gone upstairs. And then like 90 seconds later, he scores, and I'm screaming at the telly, that one counts, that one counts. And then but then you've got almost like 45 minutes to get used to the fact that you're going to win the cup here, because it wasn't like Liverpool were even in the game. We absolutely dominated them. We had a plan and we executed it perfectly. Like, Joe Linton, what a player.
Yeah.
A 40 million pound joke until Eddie Howe came in. Now, he's just he's a Brazilian international defensive midfield powerhouse. He covered every blade of grass, and he bends the rules a bit. He threw Harvey Elliott to the ground behind the referee's back, and the ref couldn't do anything because he didn't see it. But it's the passion that they have for the club, these players. Like Bruno Guimaraes and Joe Linton, they'll make a tackle and they celebrate like it's a goal. And you see some of these pundits mocking them for it, but it gets you going. It makes you feel these boys, this matters to them. Yeah. And I mean, that interview with Bruno Guimaraes at full time, like, you're not going to get a better interview for a cup winning captain. Like, Brazilian lad, he couldn't speak English 3 years ago, and he's being so open with his emotions. It was magnificent, and we've all watched the highlights several times since, and we've all got emotional several times since. But I think what really makes this one special is, in a strange way, PSR and the financial fair play rules, because you can't say we bought it. You can't say, oh, they've just bought this trophy. You've got like Sean Longstaff played on there. You've got Emil Kraft coming on. Fabian Schär signed for £3 million by Rafa Benitez. Dan Burn. You see them. I saw some clip going around Twitter yesterday of them Man United fans that do the overlap thing, and they're mocking them all. They thought they'd get Mbappe, and they've still got Dan Burn at left back. Yeah, we have. We've got Dan Burn, and we've got a trophy in the cabinet. You're bottom half of the table, And
it's amazing.
Like, these players have been disrespected. We haven't made a signing for 18 months, 3 transfer windows since we last signed a player, and like, for Eddie Howe to do what he's done, taking us from, he came in, we hadn't won a match in 11. We hadn't won in 11 games at the start of the season. We survived relegation from a position nobody had ever survived relegation from before. A year later, we're in the Carling Cup final, Carabao Cup final, and we're in the Champions League.
Yeah.
And then this season, we've won it. He's ended the drought. He's done what Kevin Keegan couldn't do. He's done what Sir Bobby Robson couldn't do. Kenny Dalglish, Ruud Gullit, Graham Souness even. These are all managers that have won trophies everywhere. I know you're going to say, oh, Kevin Keegan never. He won 2 championships. It's the hardest league in the world to win, and Kevin Keegan won it twice. So let's put some respect on his name.
Yeah, and 100%.
For Eddie Howe to do what he's done is a phenomenal achievement. And I saw Paul Scholes mocking him for it. It's just a League Cup. don't get me started on Paul Scholes. Like maybe he needs to put his daughter's toes in his mouth again. Huh?
No, it's
Weird,
it's
man.
amazing achievement for
Yeah,
Newcastle. Their first major trophy for 70 years, Chris, since that FA Cup win in '55. Jackie Milburn on the score sheet, of course, and Bobby Mitchell and George Hanna, of course, as well. And it's also 56 years since their last trophy, which was that Intercities Fairs Cup in '69. So, Chris, obviously, the big headline from this was Dan Burn, wasn't it? You know, what a week for him, you know, being picked for the Tuchel squad, which we'll get on to talk about on the Friday, and then scoring in the final. Funnily enough, he had that big headed chance. I don't know if people remember. Trippier crossed it in against Man United 2 years ago, and he headed it just wide. And now he's had a redemption arc, Trippier again, for Dan Burn right before half time. The man from Blythe, the man that used to play for Darlington. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it, Chris? You know, what week it's been for Dan Burn.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just a tremendous story, really. I think, like you say, Roberto, even as neutral fans like we both are, I think it just felt like a really good day for football in a way, just seeing a different team win, and Newcastle just such a commendable fan base and just so passionate, and just, yeah, I think Dan Burn encapsulates all of that, really. And I think that header, maybe it's slightly gone under the radar how good it was, that header. I mean, to find the bottom corner from that distance, the accuracy, and there wasn't that much power on the delivery. It was just a very floated kind of ball in by Trippier. For him to generate that power to find the corner, and I mean, Kelleher wasn't even near it. So, yeah, I think just it was a phenomenal goal, and you could see it coming with the way Liverpool had set up with obviously Van Dijk and Kanate kind of zonal, which still baffles me, to be honest, that they didn't change that. But still, that doesn't take anything away from the header from Burn. It was brilliant. And like you say, just a great way to kind of end his week. And hopefully he can do something similar for England.
Yeah, it would be amazing if he topped up with a goal for England. But obviously that second goal, Andrew, fantastic, wasn't it, from Jacob Murphy to win that header? Not an easy header to win. And then that's just what Isak's been doing all season, isn't it? Into the bottom corner.
Yeah, I mean, he's always been for us. He's always been a very good player. But this season and a bit last season, but certainly this season, he's absolutely clinical. Like you're not seeing him beat. Like he had that famous non-assist against Everton where he ran past half the team from the halfway line. He's not done that so much this season. But what Eddie Howe? This again goes back to Eddie Howe. He's set the team up. Jacob Murphy is absolutely critical because he is there to give Isak the chances, and Isak is finishing them. And again, you look at the left-hand side, before it got to Murphy, it was Harvey Barnes playing the ball to Tino Livramento, crossing on his weaker foot. And before the game, all the talk was on Newcastle have lost the left-hand side. There's no Lewis Hall. There's no Anthony Gordon. We didn't need them. In many ways, we played better without them because, Livramento, obviously right-footed. If Salah tries cutting inside, he's just going into Tino land. And then going on the counter-attack, it was just, in a way, like, because there's no Gordon, it becomes even more focused on Isak and getting the ball to Isak. And we got the ball to him twice because he scored that goal beforehand. And if he wasn't offside, Guimaraes was. But the man owns the big stage. You saw that celebration. That is an iconic celebration already.
Yeah, Angel of the North.
Yeah, stood there with like the hordes of black and white scarves in front of him, and he would grace any team in the world. He's that good.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, amazing day for Newcastle. And obviously, it has to be said, Pope made that big save from Curtis Jones as well. So there was a few sort of nearly moments for Liverpool, but they just didn't turn up at all, did they, Chris? I mean, they got that goal back from Chiesa, but, it's far too late to do anything. I think a lot of Liverpool fans will be frustrated because when you look at the fixture against Southampton prior to the first leg of that PSG game, obviously they had to sort of think about that PSG game, but they didn't necessarily make lots of changes, did they, going into that Southampton game? Like maybe, if they'd have rested like a Trent, obviously maybe he potentially wouldn't have got injured, right? And, they played quite a strong team still against Southampton. Do you think that's part of the downfall for Liverpool? Getting knocked out in 2 games in a week and looking a bit tired against Newcastle.
Yeah, in retrospect, I think when Slot will probably have regrets about how strong he went against Southampton. And like you say, obviously Trent, you could see how much they missed his creativity. I mean, they didn't really offer any kind of threat going forward for most of the game. So, yeah, I think Slot mentioned about the 3 cup finals, didn't he, before the Southampton game? And I think possibly he was a bit worried that they'd take that Southampton game easy and then maybe kind of drop points in that. I mean, Southampton took the lead in that game, didn't they? But yeah, I think his mindset was probably right, that he wanted the players to focus on that game as if it was a cup final, like the PSG game or the Newcastle one. But yeah, potentially a bit more rotation might have helped there, especially because they did just look so fatigued going into that final. Like the midfield in particular, McAllister, Szoboszlai, they look so leggy. And I mean, to be honest, that's quite expected, really, after playing such a high intensity game against PSG, going to extra time, obviously, as well. It was not easy for them to go again. But yeah, I think completely deserved from Newcastle's perspective. And it just felt like the stars aligned on the day, which is nice because, yeah, it's always nice to see different teams winning trophies. So, yeah,
100%. Maybe, just maybe, this could be a springboard, hopefully, for Newcastle to win further trophies. And yeah, as you said, Andrew, maybe it's a nice little turn for the different teams winning trophies. So yeah, brilliant stuff. Black and white bedlam at Wembley, and yeah, fantastic day out, I'm sure, for a lot of Newcastle fans. Looking back then at how Game Week 29's differentials got on, we're not going to be covering that, of course. We still got a lot of time till Game Week 30, but we had, of course, FPL MV and Tom from Who Got the Assist on last week. Really enjoyed that episode with George helping out on co-host duties. So interestingly, he made a comment, George, I think it was Game Week 27's pod with Sam from FPL Pricey, about Estupiñán. I think Estupiñán was his team at that point, and I asked him, is he going to be someone you're going to hold for the blank? And I think Pricey basically said, yeah, maybe that'd be a good player to hold, George, because we know what Estupiñán's done in the past. But I don't think anyone would have expected him to score that free kick against Man City. So George ended up free hitting. He free hitted, but put Estupiñán in, but he put him on his bench. So very unlucky there. I mean, everyone with any sort of logic would bench him in that away fixture. But in terms of his differentials, really interesting because he was bigging up Elanga as one of his, and he obviously got the 16-point haul. So that was really lovely from George. And he also had Mazraoui, who got a return, got a clean sheet. So 2 out of 3 for George. Semenyo was his other one, which was a frustrating blank. So that means George is sat in 3rd place with 6 points. He's making a 3-point gap ahead of everyone else on 3. But in terms of the guests, so Tom, he got the first time that a guest has come on and got 3 out of 3, Andrew, since Game Week 20's episode with Fantasy Football Scouts Joe. So amazing stuff to Tom. Bowen got a return with an assist. Garnacho, great differential shout. And Gibbs White also got an assist in that Ipswich game. So yeah, well done, Tom. Angle was a bit more unlucky, I have to say, with his picks. Williams, obviously the Forest clean sheet wipeout. Hudson-Odoi blanking. And then also Evan Nilsson. So yeah, really unlucky. I had my usual bad luck this season, Chris. I think I'm just genuinely cursed in these top 5 differentials, or sorry, top 4, top 3 even. It keeps going down, but yeah, at least it wasn't. I'm trying to take the positives. At least it wasn't a 4th benching in a row for one of my picks. All my players started, so Jimenez, Savinho, and Tavernier. Savinho, though, did get subbed off before 60, which was super painful. With a 0-pointer. Tavernier also blanked. And then Jimenez, I brought him into my own team. I backed myself and it didn't pay off. So, yeah, it's looking good for you, Chris. On my current form, I've had a stinking time with it recently, but you're still top by 2 points. 19 for you so far this season, 17 for me. And that 3 points from Tom has moved him up to joint 4th with Joe, Jason Lee, FPL, and Ethan, who came on earlier in the season. So, yeah, commiserations out really for Angle there. Joint last at the moment with 0 with FPL Andy Mode, Ash from FPL Juice, Druv, Charlie, Meerkat, and FPL Focal on 0. So, yeah, we'll see how our guest in the Game Week 30s pod gets on, but that will be a couple of episodes away. However, what we have to say, of course, is there was also the released team for Thomas Tuchel ahead of this weekend's international break. Now, of course, some big games coming up for England. They're not just Nations League games that we don't care about. They actually are fairly important World Cup qualifiers against the likes of Albania and I've forgotten the other one already. Latvia, that's it. So looking at that squad that was released, I can just get it up for you, Andrew. I mean, obviously, the first thing to say is there was a change to the original squad because Cole Palmer's injury means he's not going to be travelling. So Morgan Gibbs-White, which felt like a really weird non-inclusion, really, he's been put in, which is, feels thoroughly deserved with how well he's done this season in that Forest team. But yeah, Tuchel, obviously, he's got to create a good first impression, doesn't he? This being his first England games and his first squad. When it was initially, announced Tuchel's squad for these two games, I think, would you agree, Andrew, that the overall sort of view on it was negativity rather than positivity?
I would say so. I think there was a lot of disrespect of Dan Burn getting called up, and I feel like there's probably a bit more excitement about that now, having played the cup final. But I feel there was a lot of heartbreak that Kieran Trippier himself wasn't called up. And to go back to the previous section, you weren't going to let me say it, but Kieran Trippier is my differential pick for the running because, I mean, he showed on Sunday, he got the assist and, Lewis Hall's out, so Kieran Trippier is going to play. So I think Kieran Trippier is the differential, even though I'm not allowed to play the game. So, but yeah, obviously I'm being a bit lighthearted here. The big controversy was Jordan Henderson's recall to the squad. And yeah, I mean, you can understand why. He's basically a bit part player at Ajax. But I don't know. I think it's all a bit overplayed, the reaction. I think a lot of the time people look for things to complain about. Like they were like, "Oh, why is Adam Wharton not called up?" And it's like, well, he's a good player, but he's played about 5 games this season. Morgan Gibbs-White, yeah, he does have a case, and he's there now. But Jordan Henderson, like, it's a new manager, it's a new squad, and he needs to learn about these players. I mean, he's got like Colwell, he's a young player. He's quite inexperienced. Concert is quite inexperienced. You've got Lewis Skelly, you've got Livramento, you've got Quansah. Curtis Jones doesn't have a lot of international experience. So you've got quite a lot of young players. And then he's brought in Jordan Henderson, who, let's face it, he's probably not going to play, but he's a Champions League winning captain.
Yeah.
He's got experience. And I am not a Jordan Henderson fan. I dismissed him as a cheerleader for many years, based in no part on the local rivalry, just on what I saw.
Yeah.
But it always seemed like the player passed him by, but he's there giving them, come on, lads, come on. Oh, great pass, Trent. Oh, great touch, Mo. But they all call him the leader, and he's a Champions League winning captain. He's a league title winning captain. Steven Gerrard couldn't win the league title. And if it was Steven Gerrard who was, played abroad for a year and was a bit of a bit part player, but he was in the squad for experience, I don't think there'd be the same sort of reaction. And I do think Jordan Henderson is perhaps a bit disrespected in that sense, which is weird for me to say, but I just don't think it's a big deal. I mean, you look at the team, it looks like he's probably going to play a 4-2-3-1 of some description. So you're going to have Declan Rice there. You could have Bellingham playing deep. You've got Curtis Jones there. Reece James has been playing holding midfield. You've got Morgan Gibbs-White. So, I just don't think it's a big deal.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point.
And
from you,
I mean, you look at like Wharton. Wharton's obviously he came in, he was good. He's playing for the under-21s. Is it better for him to play for the under-21s and train with the first team like he is doing, or is it better for him to sit on the bench for 2 games and get like 3 minutes? I just don't think being a non-player, you've got Jordan Henderson for that role.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's a good point you make, Andrew, 100%. And I think a lot of people, when the squad was announced, Chris, for the under-21s team, led by, of course, Lee Carsley, was very positive because a lot of the players you're seeing on that look like they're at the peak of their sort of powers. So one controversial decision I thought was maybe a bit of a miss overthought from Tuchel was going for Solanke, because obviously he's had his injury problems this season and he has struggled for any sort of form, hasn't he? So when you've got Liam Delap, who's had a really good season despite a really tough season for Ipswich, are you a bit surprised that someone like a Solanke's been put in by Tuchel?
Yeah, because of his fitness record, I think this season it was a bit of a surprise, especially like you say, when there were other options in that area who have maybe had a better season than him. And yeah, but I suppose, I mean, it's almost guaranteed Harry Kane's going to start. So I just feel sorry for whoever's kind of playing that understudy role for England in that striker position. They're not really going to get much of a shout. I think Tuchel's obviously a massive fan of Harry Kane. So yeah, it probably doesn't really matter who that second striker is, really. They're not going to get much look in, I wouldn't imagine, until after the World Cup, probably when Kane, I would imagine, probably retires from international football. But yeah, would have been nice to see Delap. I feel like he would have deserved his place.
Yeah. Are you surprised at all, Andrew, by the inclusion of Reece James? I'm trying to ask someone who's not biased towards him, but obviously he's had his injury problems as well, hasn't he? But on his day, he's one of the best right backs in the league, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely one of them contenders to Kieran Trippier for the best right back in the league. But I'm not surprised he's in the squad because Tuchel knows him. He's, he was a big player for Thomas Tuchel, and I feel like he's trying to get. I mean, this is a big job for Tuchel. It's the most highest profile job in the country. He's about to get pelters like he's never known before. He's already getting them because of his nationality. He's going to get them when he doesn't sing the national anthem. So I feel like surrounding himself with a bit of experience and a bit of familiarity for the first qualifiers against teams you'd expect them to be. I mean, it's not like we're playing France and Holland. These are. It's a good way to bed in, I think. And I do wonder if the squad had been announced on Monday, if Kieran Trippier might have got in there, because he showed, again, the big stage. Like Luis Diaz, he's got pace to burn, but he couldn't get anywhere near Kieran Trippier. He just marshalled him the whole match. But then I suppose you've got Kyle Walker in that sort of role anyway, so...
Yeah, it's interesting. It does feel like there's a lack of fullbacks right now in form at this point, Chris, and obviously that blow to the injury to Lewis Hall. I mean, he would have done so well, I think, in this England team. So it's a bit of a kind of conundrum, isn't it? That especially that left back spot. Do you go for a maybe a Lewis Skelly or someone like that, who's obviously had a really good season, or do you think he'll go with the sort of tried and tested options a bit more?
Yeah, I think, like you said, there's not really a standout kind of left back apart from maybe Lewis Skelly within that. I know Livermento's obviously switched over to the left for Newcastle and he's quite versatile. I mean, Colwell last season played most of his minutes at left back, didn't look entirely comfortable, to be honest. So I don't know. It's hard to know. I know you were saying they might set up in a 4-2-3-1. I don't know, to be honest. I feel like that squad maybe looks more like it might be geared towards a 3 at the back with the amount of kind of centre backs. But then again, in modern football, you see centre backs playing at full back all the time, really. So yeah, and obviously Dan Burn played at left back, didn't he, last season a lot. So yeah, I think it's the defensive options have been depleted, definitely. But again, for these 2 qualifiers, it should be more than enough to get past Albania and Latvia.
Yeah, and absolutely. And the last point we'll make on the forwards that have been picked, obviously Foden and Rashford, Andrew, it's fair to say they've had a massive drop off the last couple of seasons, especially Rashford. But with his move to Aston Villa, and he's put in some good performances, to be fair, sort of in the short spell he's been there. Do you think this is a really good opportunity now for Rashford to kind of take back that role in the England first 11?
I think it is whatever Marcus Rashford wants it to be. Like, he's gone to Villa. He's still not starting regularly, I don't think, is he? He's impact sub. So, you talk about if you take Harry Kane off after 70 minutes, you've got Rashford, he could play that role, perhaps not his favourite role. I would expect Anthony Gordon to start, and he'd be a good impact sub for him. But from what you hear, it's all on Marcus Rashford. If he wants Villa to rejuvenate his career, he can knuckle down. And, I mean, the talent's there. And he's been given the opportunity. Unai Emery and Thomas Tuchel are two of the best managers around, and they're backing Rashford. They're giving him the chance, and it's up to him. So we'll find out, and it'll be nice to see. It'll be nice to see, because I think he's a nice lad, Rashford, with all his, what he's done for the kids in the past. And
yeah,
I think he's got a lot of unfair criticism based on his political interventions, if you will. But he had obviously gone stale at Man United, so it would be nice if he could sort it out and get his career back on track. But like you were talking about Solanke before, I mean, like you say, it's all who is going to cover for Harry Kane. I'm a bit surprised Welbeck wasn't called up, to be honest, because if you're looking for a player to come off the bench for 20 minutes who's banging form, getting the goals, I mean, is there, he's doing that for Brighton right now, and it sounds a bit daft, but he's got the experience that Solanke doesn't.
Yeah, I suppose the only concern with Welbeck is sort of fitness, and he has had his problems in the last sort of 5 or so weeks with that. So maybe that's what Tuchel's thought about. But yeah, no, I think look, ultimately this is an introductory 2 games, and we don't necessarily have to put loads of onus on it. But yeah, you want England to start strong under Tuchel. So yeah, really interesting stuff. Okay, we'll quickly look at what's our early plans. Now, of course, a lot of this could change, so we're not going to spend too much time on this. But from your perspective, Chris, if you're thinking about what transfers you'd make, or maybe even players you're interested in rather than necessarily transfers ahead of 30, what's your thoughts with at the moment?
I think Andrew spoke about earlier. I think those Palace kind of players, I mean, Munoz seems like a really good option for that Southampton fixture. Maybe even Ismail Assar, and potentially, if you can get to a Mateta, he might be a good option too. I think those kind of Palace assets could be quite appealing.
Okay, interesting. From your perspective, Andrew, are you looking at City players ahead of Leicester?
Marmoush, Mateta, Munoz, maybe Gvardiol, because Leicester don't score goals. And I suppose going back to the Cole Palmer, if you really wanted, you could go for like an Eze or a Sarr, but I just don't see it with them. Like, I know Sarr's done well the last couple of weeks, but the last time he did well for a couple of weeks, I brought him in and he didn't out for another 6 weeks. So
yeah, I guess you just bring him in hoping he carries on that purple patch because it's Southampton, I guess.
Well, I think when you've got the double game weeks in mind, you want the big players. And for Palace, it's Henderson, it's Munoz and Mateta. And maybe Eze would be the 4th choice if you don't want the goalkeeper. I don't think you look elsewhere apart from them. I'm not keen on Gvardiol. I think his attacking input has gone the last few weeks. He's not really doing much. He seems to be cutting across as the 3rd centre-back while Núñez bombs on.
Yeah.
But it is Leicester. It is, and they don't score goals. What is it? 2 goals in 9 matches? Something daft like that. So I think you've got that little bit of a safety net there.
Yeah.
But yeah, Gvardiol, Munoz, Marmoush, Mateta, what more do you need?
Exactly. And my team, I think I'm looking at basically it's all about Cole Palmer. If Cole Palmer is fit and available, then I won't need to take a hit, because I don't envisage that Chelsea game against Spurs being a bad fixture, even with Chelsea's slightly patchy form recently. But the priority will be whatever I do with Palmer to replace Jimenez, because it's away to Arsenal. I knew that Jimenez was likely just for 1 week. So the plan is, obviously Dango is a big doubt for starts in that Ipswich game. So it's quite nice I can bench him for the Ipswich game. And then the plan would be to do Jimenez to a striker. But the kind of striker, if I do go for Palmer out, then it will be probably up to Haaland, just because I feel like I want City coverage in that Leicester game. Or I could potentially, if I do want to sell Palmer anyway and not spend as much as Haaland, then I can go for Marmoush or Monteta. It's just about whether I take a hit or not. And if I'm captaining Salah, let's say I bring in Marmoush, I might not have as much confidence to captain Marmoush potentially. It's an interesting shout, but it feels a little risky. So if I'm taking a -4 and selling Palmer, then maybe I just don't sell Palmer, basically. If Palmer's fit, I just get Marmoush in and just captain Salah is definitely possible. So yeah, we'll see how that changes going into 30 when we discuss that at some point. But we also have to, of course, cover off the mini league. So the last couple of weeks we've been unable to update you, but we can do that now. So game week 28, as I mentioned earlier in the pod, kind of squeezed through to get a green arrow, but it was luckily enough to beat my dad 62-54 in the mini league. So very happy with that. Chris, you had a tough game against Canyon Solar, who I have to say, he had the highest scoring points in game week 29 with an amazing, I think, 83 points in the end. So Canyon Solar is doing very well indeed. And you caught him on a good day. 64-48 loss for you there. But crucially, also, let's see, because again, game week 28's fixture, in your sort of title race, you've got up against Oli Ide. He had his fixture in game week 28. And although he won that, you're still enough of a kind of points gap for it to not be a massive issue. Because then in game week 29, it swerved back the other way, didn't it? And Oli Ide, who he's had a few defeats recently, he's been slipping, and he slipped again in game week 29 with an 81-70 loss to Sugar FC. Meanwhile, you got the job done, Chris, with a very solid win. Yet again, 55-46 over Jamie Burgoyne. And I had another defeat, unfortunately. I've just been sort of up and down this season with the head-to-head. So 50-45 against Stuart Davies. So that means I slipped down in the standings to, unfortunately, 16th. Whereas you have got a nice buffer in the sort of title race. And funnily enough, you've got the same gap. I'm trying to remember what the points actually are in the Premier League, but it is a 12-point gap as well here. So really interesting to see that. And I think there's also a 12-point gap between 4th and 13th, which is between Chelsea and Manchester United. So yeah, it's actually, I say 12-point gap, it's actually 14. I've just seen Liverpool's even less. So you're actually outdoing Liverpool this season, Chris. So fair play to you. And it's really interesting with the relegation race as well, because at the moment, I mean, Danielle, to be fair, is only 4 points off Oli Ide, but I don't think he's going to have enough in him to overdo him. In the bottom three, though, it's been the same for a while. However, FPL Ullen has recently slipped in there, and Sugar FC, after being in the bottom three for a long time, is really, he's getting some sweet victories. It has to be said. FPL Ullen in 30 points on 26th, and 27th deleted player on 28, and then Uncle Napoli on 27. So Sidanth potentially still in danger with 32 points, and Sugar FC on 33. We'll see how that goes going into the final 9 game weeks of the season. But the last thing we've got to cover, of course, is the quiz, which is always good fun. So we do the quiz every week, and I really enjoy doing the quiz. And so I've got to ask you this week, Andrew, what is your buzzer you're going to go for? It could be Newcastle themed. It could be anything you want.
You mentioned this, and I've spent 90 minutes and I've not thought about it once. I suppose we'll just go with Burn.
Dan Burn, the man from Blythe. Brilliant. And Chris, what's yours?
I quite like your description of Cole Palmer earlier, Roberto. We'll go whole Palmer this week.
Whole Palmer. You know what? It's a pessimistic view, but you know what? He could be a hole that you can fill this week if you get the win in the quiz. So yeah, fair play. Okay.
So is this like first to answer kind of thing?
Yeah. So I'll explain it as we go, but there's a few different sort of question formats. The first question, the way it will go is I will give you the opportunity to answer. So the first question is themed around. Obviously, we're at our pause now with 2 weeks off, international break. So there's been 29 game weeks so far, 9 game weeks to go. So I want to ask you, in our game we like to call hot potato. So what this is you give an answer, you buzz in to start with to give an answer, then it basically, until you get one wrong, you keep going, and it passes from person to person like a bit of a tennis match. So hot potato this week. Players with 29 starts in the Premier League. So they've started every single game they've played. But don't forget, some teams have had a blank game week, so they won't have played 29 games. So players with 29 starts in the Premier League this season, buzz in with your buzzer when you think you can have a go at it.
Big Dan Burn.
Okay. Andrew.
Jordan Pickford.
Jordan Pickford has 29 starts. Well done. Good start. Back to you, Chris.
Saliba.
William Saliba of Arsenal has not had 29 starts, I'm afraid. So 1-0 to Andrew there. Fair play. Did you have any other you had up your sleeve there, Andrew?
My next answer was going to be Mo Salah.
Mohamed Salah, of course, the Egyptian king, would have been correct. So, yeah, 29 starts for Mo Salah. The others that you didn't name, Raya for Arsenal, started every single game. And then you've also got another goalkeeper in Leno, as well as Onana and Matt Sells. But then you've also got Tielemans, Kirkez, Collins, Caicedo for Chelsea, Chris. You didn't say him. Tarkowski for Everton, Van Dijk. Van Dijk actually played every single minute this season. Gravenberch, also Ola Aina, Kilman. And yeah, so those are some of the options you could have said. Of course, Collins as well, playing every single minute for Brentford. But yeah, interesting. When you gave Saliba, I thought, you know what, that's a really good answer. But yeah, I'm afraid Saliba this season didn't start the game against Aston Villa back in game week 22. So he's had 27 starts actually, because he also didn't play against Liverpool. So yeah, unlucky there. Saliba usually an ever present, but that means it's 1-0 to Andrew going into question number 2.
Dunburn.
And question number 2, we're feeling a bit of hot potato this week because it's another hot potato. Double trouble. So, New England manager Thomas Tuchel, his first games in charge this weekend against Albania and Latvia. Now, this is the first time a former Chelsea manager was appointed England boss since 1996. What I want you to do, Andrew is a Newcastle fan, of course, Chris as a Chelsea fan, to name former England managers or current that have managed Newcastle or Chelsea.
Big Dan Burn.
All right, Andrew's gone straight in.
Glenn Hoddle.
Glenn Hoddle, yes, former Chelsea manager. That is correct. Over to you, Chris.
Kevin Keegan.
Yes, of course. Love it if we beat them. Back to you, Andrew.
Sir Bobby Robson.
Yes, Newcastle, of course. Legend. Back to Chris.
Oh, that was going to be my one. Right.
Gonna have to push you, Chris.
Yeah, I'll go Steve McLaren.
That is correct. Great answer. Newcastle, of course, and England. Back to you, Andrew.
Sam Allardyce.
Yes, Big Sam, of course. So that means we've got just the one answer left that you've not said. Chris, it's back to you.
Oh, God, I have no idea. That's the last one, to be honest.
Are you going to give up with this one?
Yeah, I have no idea.
Okay, he's forfeited. So that's another point for Andrew. 2-0. And the answer was Thomas Tuchel. You could have said him. You could have said him. That's the game. I did say current or past. Yeah, fair play. But you did very well. That's a really great game of hot potatoes. So fair play, both you, Chris and Andrew. So that's 2-0 to Andrew. Then going to question 3. Now, this one is more of a sort of, I'll ask the question and you just got to kind of keep going. So it's not back and forth. You just got to buzz in and try and be quick on that buzzer. So, and it's basically whoever's the first to get it rather than the first to get it wrong. So 3 players in the Premier League or in FPL, however you want to frame it, have scored 2 own goals this season. Just 3. Can you name any of them? Any ideas? 3 players. If we can't get an answer originally, then I'll give you some club clues. Chris, are you thinking anyone for this? 2 own goals this season. So they are players that tend to start. That's the important bit, and can sometimes put it in the net. Have you got any ideas, Chris?
Nothing's coming to mind at the moment, to be honest.
Andrew?
Can't even think of anyone that scored an own goal.
In that case, I'll give you the clubs these teams are playing for. So first up, Crystal Palace.
Big Dan Burn, Gahey.
Yes, Mark Gahey. He's straight in. Fair play. Well done. 3-0. It's you're absolutely walking away with this, I have to say. Fair play. The other answer you could have said, I was about to say, was Wolves. Would you have known that, Chris?
No, probably not. No.
It was Craig Dawson was the other one. And then your last one, which is a bit more obscure, but he actually did score an own goal just this weekend. Vitaly Janelt of Brentford was your other answer. So well done. 3-0 to Andrew then. Question 4. What I want to know is the most owned player in each FPL position. And that will include assistant manager. So that's forward, midfielder, defender, keeper, and assistant manager. So buzz in when you think you can get.
Go on, Chris. You have a go.
Come on, then. Get on the board. Yeah, Cole Palmer.
Okay, Chris.
I'm guessing striker is Isak.
Yep, Alexander Isak.
Then Salah midfield.
Yep, Salah is the right pick for midfield.
And then who's in goal? That's the interesting one. That's the hard one, isn't it, really?
It is.
Ooh, I want to say Raya, but it could be Sells, couldn't it? I'll go Raya.
Raya is correct. So now you're just down to your defender and your manager.
Oh, manager. I feel like people still have Slot. I felt like I saw his ownership was really high, so I'll go Slot.
You are correct. Just defender to get now.
Gabriel?
Gabriel is correct. Well done. Very impressive. Straight full house there. Fantastic. Yeah, really good shout. Did you have any sort of inclination towards those answers, Andrew?
I was surprised by Raya. I actually thought it would be one of the budget ones like Fabianski.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
That's a good shout. But no,
It
Raya
wasn't
was
a
the
good
answer.
shout because it was wrong.
No, but
what I mean
everyone
is,
has him on the bench, don't they?
Yeah, there's good logic, is what I meant to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, definitely. It is interesting when looking at keepers because the ownership, Sells was quite close behind on 18.7%, Raya on 26.2%. And then Fabianski's all the way in 4th, actually, with 14.6%, and Pickford in 3rd. So, yeah, David Raya still in a lot of people's teams, it seems. And yeah, Arne Slot is the highest owned by a decent margin, actually, 24%. And then the next highest being David Moyes at 11%. So, yeah, big David Moyes, of course, scored some assistant manager points for me and Chris and Andrew as well. Did you go David Moyes as well, Andrew?
I did, and I was watching the black box when he got the goal, and
the Tarkovsky goal.
As his dancing was magically.
Oh, I loved Az's dancing; it was fantastic. So yeah, brilliant stuff. Okay, well that of course means it's 3-1 then going into the final question. So I'm afraid, Chris, it is a loss for you this week, or is it? Or is it? Because the final question, there are 4 points up for grabs. 4 points. So this is basically, you got to just answer these individually, but as many points as you can get. So the first person to get it. So talking of assistant manager, this will just be the first to get it in. So buzz in and see if you can get the answer. And whoever, if no one gets it with both of their attempts, then we just move on to the next opportunity.
Okay.
First one, we just mentioned assistant manager. Which assistant manager in game week 24 onwards, because that's of course when it started, has the most draws so far this season? Which assistant manager has the most draws? Buzz in when you think you want to take a punt. Any ideas? Who tends to draw their matches?
Big Dan Burn.
Yep.
I'll have a guess at Emery.
Okay. Unai Emery is incorrect.
It's a guess.
I'm afraid it's incorrect. So, Chris, you've got a chance here. If you get this wrong, we'll have to move on.
So you mean for the whole season, or just
No,
since
it's just
this is
obviously because it's game week 24 onwards, which was when the
Okay.
chip was in play.
right?
So it's 24 to 29.
That's a tricky question.
Oh, actually, hang on. I just thought about this. They put the stats on, didn't they, for the game week 23's assistant manager? So maybe it's 23 onwards. Apologies.
Oh, if only I'd known.
To be honest,
That
I
would've
didn't
made
even
a
think
huge
about that because obviously everyone played it in
Sorry.
24. Why they did that, I don't know. But anyway, it's only one game week difference.
Everton, I don't know, it's a punt.
So you're going for David Moyes. I can tell
David
you
Moyes,
that
sorry, yeah.
is correct. Well done. You've pulled it back to 3-2. So with 3 more points up for grabs, it ain't over till the fat lady sings. Okay, that means it's 3-2. Yeah, David Moyes is your correct answer. And of course, remember one of them being that Liverpool game. Which assistant manager then has the most table bonus? And not just wins, table bonus.
Big Dan Burn.
victories. Yes,
Marco Silva.
correct. Well done. Straight in there, no messing about. What would you have said, Chris?
Yeah, I wouldn't know, to be honest.
You wouldn't know. Okay, well, I can tell you there were 2 other answers you could have said. Oliver Glasner, the other one, and Vitor Pereira of Wolves. So those were the 3 with the most wins in table bonus. So fair play. That means it's 4-2 now to Andrew. Okay.
Still a chance of a draw.
Next question. And it is, talking of draws, which manager, has the most table bonus draws this period between game weeks that I've mentioned already? Which manager with the most table bonus draws? We've already seen which manager has the most draws in general, but table bonus in particular. Any ideas, Chris? You need this. Are you fancying it?
Not really, to be honest.
Big Dan Burn, I'll say Moyes.
David Moyes. You would be correct. Well done. It's 5-2. It's 5-2. Again, there were a few answers you could have said, Chris. So, you didn't have to say Moyes, but there was a few options. We had Emery, we had McKenna, Ruben Amorim, Ange, and Graham Potter as well. So a few answers there. It is now 5-2 to Andrew. So we have got one more question to go. Can he make it 6-2? Which assistant manager has got the most clean sheets? Chris, any ideas?
Arteta?
Mikel Arteta is correct. You've pulled one back. Well done. Yes, frustratingly as well, because I went for Arteta in game week 26 and he didn't get one against West Ham, of course. But yes, that means the quiz is finished. 5-3. Well done, Andrew. Very good win. Very comprehensive in the end, but a very good win nonetheless. Hope you enjoyed that.
I did very much so.
And that's where we're going to wrap up the pod this week. Thanks for listening, everyone. It's been a nice sort of reflective game week review rather than a sort of look ahead, because we have to be aware there's so much that can change. But hope you have enjoyed this episode. And it's been a pleasure getting you on, Andrew.
It's been grand to be on. My username has my YouTube username and my Twitter username. So go and subscribe to the FPL Nightmare and get shouted at every game week about what you should be doing.
No, it's all good. Thanks for coming on. Yeah, make sure you check out Andrew on YouTube at FPL Nightmare and also on the socials as well. Chris, hope you enjoyed.
Yes, very good. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Andrew, again for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me on. It's been a pleasure. A lot more fun than I expected. I was quite nervous and there was no reason to be, because you're both wonderful lads.
Oh, much appreciate those lovely words. Thank you, Andrew. And yeah, as I said earlier, we're excited to get on FPL Black Wolf next week to look ahead to the FA Cup quarterfinals. But until then, we'll see you in the next one.